it's a good reminder for educators like myself to realize that we start to elevate our skill level. Like we talk at this level and goes up the more we talk about, because we just assume everybody's taken all our other classes. And you have to remember somebody's just walking in off the street today with no knowledge. And so it's a constant reminder for me to temper the level that I speak at.
Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Today, I'm joined by Teresa Duncan, the President of Odyssey Management and the host of long-running podcasts Nobody Told Me That and Chew on This. Teresa is also the author of Moving Your Patients to Yes, Easy Insurance Conversations, which is a must-read for every office manager and treatment coordinator. Teresa has a wealth of experience within the dental industry and is an expert at all things insurance and RCM. Welcome to the show, Teresa. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to meet you, and congratulations on the podcast. You are out there killing it. You're building up your episode list. So I'm excited. I love when good podcasts come on the scene.
Thank you very much. That means a lot. Yeah. I really appreciate that. It's very impressive, the length of time that you've had both of your podcasts. And I've got a lot of respect for anybody that's able to commit and execute for that long. So,
well, when you're a public speaker, you're just used to talking. So thank God people like to listen to it. So that
certainly helps. Absolutely. Yeah. And we have a mutual friend, Beth Gaddis, who is always singing your praises. And so I've been really excited to have this conversation, get a chance to meet you.
Beth is phenomenal. What a true connector. Like really,
oh my gosh.
She knows everybody and she's always happy to make introductions. Like that's a true connector.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Beth. So, I'd love if we could start. Could you walk me through your career, how you ended up in dental and how you ended up founding Odyssey and what you do?
I actually didn't plan on going into dental. I think a lot of people don't plan on going into dental unless you're, have a dentist in the family. I actually took a break. I had been waitlisted at 2 medical schools. And so I was really thinking I was going to go back and reapply and get into medical school. And I started working in a dental office, and much to my traditional Asian mom's chagrin, upset, I loved dental more than medical. When I told her I wasn't going to reapply, she was like, what are you talking about? So I was an assistant, I was a front office person, and then I got up to manager and multi-location. Then we went down to a single location. And then this is what happened. I was asked to speak at a study club, a perio study club, to talk about billing for Rustin at the time. And I think the bug just hit me, and people started asking me for help, and that just really got me going. And then my boss was like, yeah, sure, help those other people. And now we joke that he's like, why did I tell you to do that? I should have said, no, don't do it. But I do a little bit of work for him. I've worked with him for years. We're more like family than anything. So I really enjoy the whole dental industry. But then when I got really excited about helping other dentists, that's when I realized I needed to go a little bit outside of Northern Virginia and start, I did some speaking. I had a consulting company, had some consultants under me. And then I realized I just want to educate. And so now I spend most of my time talking, speaking, giving classes, writing, just doing a lot of education, which is really, I think, that really is what gets me excited. So I loved the dentists that I had as clients. Don't get me wrong. And if you're listening, it's not that I didn't enjoy you. I just realized it was way more fun to really get the word out on a bigger scale.
If you think back to, that first experience where you were at the study club and you were doing public speaking, you said you kind of caught the bug. Were you nervous then? And do you ever get nervous now, or does that just kind of go away?
So this sounds awful. It really sounds awful, but I wasn't nervous. And I think I'm just very outgoing. I wasn't nervous. And now the very first, I guess, bigger speaking, because this was in front of maybe 20 people, right? But we were on a big dinner table. It was very, casual, and that was fine. But just being able to answer those questions is really like the adrenaline, right? That's what you get hit with. So then, my friend Lynn Mortello ran the Association of Dental Implant Auxiliaries. And she said, oh, you talk about insurance. Nobody wants to talk about insurance. So why don't you talk about insurance in front of my group? And I said, oh, sure, let's do that. And I'm thinking it's going to be another 20 or 30 people. And it ended up being 200 people. So I thought, I should have been nervous. At that point, I should have been nervous, but it was more like all right, I can do this. The only time I got nervous was when I was asked to keynote. That's very different. I mean, you've probably been doing a lot. Keynoting is very different than doing lectures and trainings and workshops. That I was super nervous, and I realized I'm never doing that again. I am not rah rah. I am not like everybody get up and stretch. That was terrible. I even had dreams about it. It was terrible. So I am better with a crowd that is there. Their jam is my jam. That's my kind of audience. Yeah.
When did you realize that there was just a real need for additional education related to insurance? And how did you decide that you were the one to do it?
So I want to give a shout out to the late Charles Blair, because he was there were only like one or two people out there speaking, Tom Lamoley, Charles Blair. I think maybe even Dr. Bornstein was doing it at that time. There weren't a lot of insurance speakers. And, the problem I run into now is that I can't be everywhere. And it was the same with them. We just can't be everywhere. And at that time, it wasn't even like insurance was, you took an insurance class because maybe you'd had issues with a claim. But now everybody participates with everything. Like you have to take an insurance class to learn how to do it. And there's just not a lot of us. So I did not realize that it was going to take off like it did. I thought I was going to have to do a lot of marketing and writing articles and all that kind of stuff. But it's not because Charles wasn't great. It's because there's just one of Charles. And now there's just one, there's one of me, and there's other ones out there. But I definitely think there's still more room. And in fact, I'm mentoring a couple girls who are great at insurance and getting them, hey, you can do this, you can do this. Because at some point I can't be everywhere. And that, we were talking earlier about scaling. So I created an online course for that because I can't. And at some point you also start thinking, this is really tiring. This is exhausting. And so, so the new crop coming up that want to speak on insurance, there's so much room. There's so much room at the table. So come on up. There's plenty to do.
Can you share a little bit more about the online course, like how it's structured, how people find it?
It's called Dental Insurance Design and Management, and it's about 8 hours and 20 plus modules, and they're digestible, so you can skip in and out. And I've heard from people that there's certain modules that they go back to all the time, and so you get a year's access. And what I've heard is they, one person will buy it, they want the certificate at the end of completion, but then if they bring on a new person, they're welcome to share the login there. You do have a year, but only one person gets a certificate. And apparently people like getting certificates, so people will usually get another seat at it. But my goal, honestly, is just if I can make it digestible and easy to watch, that's how you're going to learn it. My 8-hour workshops, which I give all the time, are just, you have to love insurance to sit through it, which is, there's a lot that love it and they do. And I like to think I make it fun, but it's 8 hours at once. And so if you can do 8 hours in bites, I think that's so much easier. Yeah.
What do you think are the primary benefits for a practice to send somebody to one of these workshops or to have them go through this course? Like what can be expected as far as an outcome after somebody has gone through this curriculum?
That's a really good question. I think there's two outcomes I want from them. I want for them to understand the environment within which they're working. So I want them to understand the economy, the insurance economy, the insurance ecosystem. Why do they do this when we're expecting them to do that? And so really a big understanding of the industry, because they cannot make decisions about participation if they don't understand the clues that they're looking for. There's one, and that's a big one. The second one is a lot of them don't have even the systems in place. So, we go over why we check for benefits, how to do that, why we check for eligibility, how to do that. How do we work outstanding claims? Why do we work outstanding claims? And then we go over a whole section on participation. So whether it's live or online, what I'm doing is giving them the big view. I start out with the industry, and then I bring them down so they're more tactical and in the practice. There are new people it feels like we're getting better, like people are coming back to the office, but we lost a lot of people since COVID. And you had a lot of people taking the insurance class because it was always that person's job, and now that person's not here. I had a ton of dental spouses taking the class because they had to now figure out what was going on in the system, but they didn't necessarily want the team to know that they didn't know, because that's a very important thing with spouses, is that you have to manage the team, but if they know you don't know anything, that's tough. So I think a good outcome is understand the industry, and then also know if you need to course correct what you have in place. And if you don't have it in place, now you're setting it up. Yeah, those are the outcomes.
I think that's great. A really good point about just needing to have the understanding of the industry within which you work in, and the way that things function. And there is a lot of gaps there. And I think a lot of times assumptions are made that people have a higher level of education regarding certain topics within a dental practice and have these processes already in place and understand the right way to handle things. And there is so much complexity to what needs to be done in a dental practice that it's really awesome that you're providing these educational opportunities to people. When you're teaching classes, I know you've taught a lot of classes, both online and conferences. What are some of like the aha moments that you see people have, or just like common things that people just don't know?
The one that makes me sad, I'll tell you the one that makes me the most sad, is there are dentists who will take my class and I'll go over write-offs. So in insurance, there are times when a write-off is appropriate, and then there are times where a write-off is not appropriate. And when you don't train your team members, or when they've never even talked about this with anyone, what they're going to do is follow the insurance EOB, the explanation of benefits. And so when you have secondary insurance, and I'll make sure I kind of keep this simple, because you're not an insurance like expert, right? Or even an enthusiast, right? Like I call my people coding nerds. When you have two insurances, sometimes you have to wait till all the payments come in before you realize how much is billable back to the patient. So I would say in classes, okay, you don't write off when the first one comes back in, the first set of insurance. You don't write off when the second one is. You take a look at everything and do one write off at the end. So what some doctors were realizing as I was talking through is that either the person was doing it, or even themselves, they were writing off when every EOB came back in. And so I would say to them, I would get calls from doctors saying, why am I writing so many refund checks? And it was because they were writing off too much, and the patient ended up getting a credit. And the second I say, why am I writing too many refund checks? There's almost always 2 to 3 people in the audience where I just see the color drain out of their faces, because I just identified something that has been bugging them, and they maybe forgot about it, or maybe it's something they were waiting to talk to me about after class. And at least 2 to 3 people. So if you're listening to this now and you're thinking, why am I writing so many refund checks? First thing I always check is your secondary insurance and primary insurances, are the write-offs accurate on there? So that's one. Then the next one that I get is the fact that when you go to appeal a claim, most of the time the claim has been processed and denied because you maybe didn't send in the right information for it to go through the system. And that doesn't mean that you get angry and think everything's being denied. A lot of times it's the person that is doing the claims don't realize exactly what needs to be sent in, or maybe they're sending in really bad quality images. So a lot of times, and I've sat in on a ton of claims reviews, and sometimes the images that are sent in are just awful. And so if I'm a consultant reviewer, how am I supposed to make a determination if the image is for lack of a better term, right? So there's got to be some responsibility on that end. And when we go over the requirements for documentation, it really, a lot of people will say, I thought I was sending enough, and now I'm realizing I was sending a lot, but not what they wanted. There's that comes up. There's just a lot of pain out there, only because we've got brand new people coming in and doing the system, and they haven't learned the basics. This is years ago. I was teaching one class, and it was going to be the basics of dental insurance. That's what we titled it, basics of dental insurance. And a girl messaged me. She emailed me and she said, I'm taking your class in 2 weeks. Will you go over what a deductible is? That was like somebody starting a podcast saying, do you think I need a microphone? Like, that is how basic that is. And so I couldn't even wait 2 weeks. I called her immediately. But then it's a good reminder for educators like myself to realize that we start to elevate our skill level. Like, we talk at this level and goes up the more we talk about, because we just assume everybody's taken all our other classes. And you have to remember, somebody's just walking in off the street today with no knowledge. And so it's a constant reminder for me to temper the level that I speak at.
I would imagine that would be challenging, because your wealth of knowledge is so deep that, going back to the deductible example, it's like, you're just going to think that everybody is aware of that portion. So it is kind of eye-opening that when you recognize you really have to start at a base level to ensure that there's a foundation of understanding that you can continue to build on over time.
I was a manager for many years, right? So onboarding new employees, I just always assumed they were starting like with no experience. And it's the same with insurance. When I talked to this girl, what had happened was she was out of high school. She had never had her own insurance for everything, never had her own home insurance, car insurance. She never paid for her copays at the doctor's checkups because it was always her parents' plan. So deductible was not even like in her glossary. Like she didn't know what it was. So that's what I have to remember. And that's what we have to remember when we train people. It's like brand new, like they're babies. We have to teach them tooth numbers. We have to teach them deductibles. But to your point though, the skill level, it's not just my skill level. Some of the people that take my classes are like, they know their stuff inside out. Like we could have serious high level conversations, and I have to keep them entertained too, because I also have to, my responsibility is to also update them on what's going on in the industry. So I get the whole gamut. And really, if you take my classes and you're a repeat taker, you're a nerd like I am. So it's good. We recognize each other.
And as somebody that is not an expert, I want to just go back for a second to the story you were talking about, the primary, secondary insurance and writing the refund checks based off of the EOBs coming in. Is the implication there that a practice ends up paying out money that they don't need to? It actually ends up costing revenue over time. Am I properly understanding the negative consequences of?
Yes, that's accurate. So, and typically when you're in network, you're already operating at a reduced level, right? So, in many situations, you're taking the write off the first EOB, and that might be enough. But then when the second one comes in, you've already taken one write-off. It may not always be necessary to take the second write-off, especially if you're not in network for the second one. So it's unnecessary giving of a courtesy. And it sets up a situation where the patient ends up getting a refund. The patient's like, oh, I made money by going to the dentist. Like it's illogical. But when you're caught in the whole thing of I need to process all these checks, and you have somebody who's not paying attention, and if they're never corrected to them, it's like, oh yeah, we generate refunds all the time. And there's a point where there's people doing it by not realizing that they're not aware of the system. And then there's the other insidious side which I've run into all the time. People just don't care. Like they're just like, I got to do this. And you know what? This doctor's not so great anyways. I'm just punching a clock. And that unfortunately I see as well. So as a business owner, I own my own small business. Like, yeah, you can trust your employees and you can do all that, but you still have to pay attention. You can't just give them, carte blanche to run the business.
Now, in your podcast, Nobody Told Me That, one of the things that you've discussed is how patients just really don't have an understanding of how dental benefits work. Could you share if you're working in a practice and you have a new patient, like what's the proper way to explain to them? Like what's a very simple, approachable way where me being, unexperienced and not knowledgeable on the subject would understand how my benefits work?
So when a patient comes in, we always find out what their insurance is. And then when I meet them, and you can have this conversation on the phone. What I teach in classes is the rule is, and I see this on Facebook groups all the time, and people are responsible for their own benefits. People are responsible for their insurance. I'm not here to babysit and all of that. So if you're in an office and that's how you feel about it, that the patient should be responsible for it, I'm not going to knock you for that. If you've made that decision, doctor, and that's how you want to run your practice, that's fine. I can't fight every battle, so that's fine. But if you're doing that because it hasn't been explained to you, then let's talk about that for a little bit. People don't understand their benefits. It looks like Greek. And what brought this home to me was my dad, when I was in my 30s, had 2 heart attacks. The second one, I remember one of the nurses came to me and said, we're going to give you a bunch of prescriptions. She said, don't go fill it at the pharmacist downstairs. Go across the street and fill it, because if you fill it downstairs, they won't be covered. If you fill it over there, it will be covered. And I said, how do you know that? And she said, well, I'm familiar with your dad's insurance. You definitely want to do that. And I, at that point, had never dealt with insurance to that level. She was like a goddess to me because she saved us a lot of money. And I thought, wow, it's not even her job. Like she's a nurse, she's not a billing person. But what she did was she took like something that was just normal knowledge for her and did us a solid. And I will never forget her. We followed up with, we sent her a basket, and I was so grateful. Plus, she took good care of my father. But the fact is, that person stands out to me. And if she were to go work, if I knew she was on the market today, I'd track her down and hire her in a minute. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, the customer service. So when a patient comes in, like say you come in and you're like handing me your card, because I work in the dental office, you're sort of expecting that I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. So if I don't, or if I don't want to help you, like, that's just not, that doesn't gel. It's terrible, right? Like, and it's almost like, well, you call your insurance company, which was common when I started years ago. Just you call your insurance company, tell me what they said. Nowadays, it's too easy for them to go down the road to an office that maybe has taken my class and wants to help. So I don't want you to take all the responsibility, but I do want you to be the translator, kind of like the benefits whisperer type. Think of it that way. Like, if I can help you understand it, that's one less roadblock to you getting the care that you need. And that is easy for me to say because I've been saying it for a while. But if you're brand new and you're listening to this, or if you're a doctor coaching a team and to get to this point, there's already enough road obstacles to getting the care, to having the, first of all, they got over their fear of the dentist to make an appointment. They think dentistry is expensive anyways. Most people do. So they're in your chair, and now you're going to tell them, well, here's one more thing you need to do before we can see you. It just doesn't work. And there's other offices out there that will be happy to do it for you. So I just think it's not just a competitive edge, but I also think if we look at it from the consumer point of view, it's the right thing to do, which is something I talk about in my classes. Is let's look at how consumers look at healthcare now. We are a consumer driven nation. Like buy now, pay later is a huge thing, right? And so if they can buy McDonald's on a payment plan, why would they not come here and want to put their crown on a payment plan? Like, and I'm not saying you accommodate that, but you have to know what the trends are in the consumer land to be able to do it here. And telling a patient to go look up their benefits that's not going to fly anywhere. But to answer your question about what do I say to you, I'll say, taking all your information, we're going to get a download of your benefits. We're going to go through it. I will let you know if I spot anything that's weird. Not all plans are created equal. If the plan that your employer selected isn't that generous, well, I'll make sure that you know about that. And I'm happy to talk to your employer about that if you want. So I kind of work that in. And then I let them know, hey, what Smith said, that it looks like we need to replace that crown on your upper left. It looks like it's going to be covered at this percentage, but I just want you to know that sometimes insurance zigs when I think it's going to zag. I will let you know. We're going to go ahead and call and find out about it. This is what we expect it to be, but I'm always going to let you know if it's different. And like I said, this flew out of my mouth because I've been doing this for a long time. But it does. And first time I had to say these things, I sounded like a moron, but it gets better the more you say it. But I think the biggest thing is if you're confident in your knowledge, like, this plan, you've read the plan documents, that this patient has third-party finance. If you're confident, this stuff comes out much easier.
You're being transparent. You're sharing the information that you have. There's a feeling as the patient, you're not trying to hide anything. You're kind of conditioning for the fact that the amount of coverage may vary and that what you're saying might not ultimately end up being exact. So you're kind of prepping the patient as well. So no, I really like that approach. Let me ask you this, because this is a personal experience that happened to me, and I know why it happened. Because while I don't know a lot, I know some. I did have to go a year ago, and ended up getting my first root canal ever, and I needed to get a crown. And so they refer me to the other endodontist. I have that taken care of, and when I got the treatment plan and everything, I'm like, yes, I'll do this. So like all the most expensive options. Sure. Like, sign me up. I'll pay for it now. No problem. I just want it to be good. And so I did all of that. And then of course, inevitably I end up getting, after, making a large payment, I get another bill in the mail. And it's like, oh, well, that's disappointing because it wasn't really explained up front that may happen. I felt like I had already paid a significant amount for the treatment that I was going to be receiving. I just chalked it up because I know why it happens. But for a customer or a patient that gets upset and they call back to the practice, and they're like, what is this? Like, you guys already charged me. You didn't tell me I was going to need to pay more. How do you handle that scenario?
So I think actually you're being very generous in saying, I wonder why I have this big balance, whatever. That's not usually the reaction. The reaction is WTF. And I paid a ton of money and I can't believe they're sending me a bill. The other reaction is they told me it would be covered. So I think your reaction was very gracious. That is not typically the person that calls the office. I wasn't perfect at this. I gotten plenty of calls where I said the wrong thing and I had to own it, and we had to split the difference and all of that. And it's humbling because you did say it with confidence, right? But when a patient calls and clearly it was our mistake, the statement that they got should not be the first sign of that mistake. And so in classes, I train them, if the EOB comes back and it is wildly different than what I thought it was going to be, I have to call them or email them and just say, look, you're getting a statement in the mail, because nobody picks up the phone anymore. So look, you're going to get something in the mail from me. The numbers don't match what I thought they were going to be. And maybe in that situation, I'm appealing it, which usually is what we do. Or call the office and let's talk about how to handle this. So I don't want to offer a discount in the beginning. Like I don't want to offer to write off anything in the beginning because it is their benefits. So yeah, there's a part of me that's like, well, I'm sorry that your plan is awful, because I don't say it, but that's really what happened. And so to get a little technical, your listeners, if they're in an office, they'll understand this. And let me just nerd out for a second, Mike. Here's the thing: when you go out of network, when you're in network, you know what fees you're working with, right? Because you got the fee schedule. When you go out of network, one of the hardest things is to find out if they're going to pay based on your fees or if they're going to pay based on the really low fee schedule that everybody else accepts. And in most cases, they pay based on the really low fee schedule. So a mistake that a lot of offices make when they decide to go out of network is they'll say things to their patients like, we're going to go out of network. It's not going to be that big of a difference. They're going to pay based on our fees. And so it's not going to be that big of a difference for you to continue to come here. And it's a huge difference. So I have one EOB that I show in my classes, and it is a $2,000 crown buildup in crown. And the patient's expecting 60% coverage because that's what we said. They pay 60% based on this tiny, tiny amount. And so the patient's out of pocket out of a $2,000 is not 40%, it's $1,500. That's not 40%. So that patient was told a totally different number. And that bill that they get, they should get an email from me or a text or a call, because that's exactly how you upset your customers. And if I got that, you got it. If I got that, I'd be livid. I'd be absolutely livid. So I think we as an industry have to understand that there's real emotions on there. There's people, yeah, they can afford it, but why should they when they budgeted based on this? And then there's people that can't afford it at all. They're paycheck to paycheck. So we have to put ourselves in their shoes. In that situation, I would probably have called to say, listen, Mike, this is very different than what we thought. Let me find out why it's not paying. Let me see if I can appeal it. And then if I come back with some bad news, I'll say, I did my best. I called. You may want to go and talk to your HR department, because this is not these are not the numbers that we thought we were going to be dealing with. So the contract's not written in a really good way, so that you're going to get the best of the benefits. And what my insurance people realized when I did that is I'm really pushing the burden over to the HR department, because and chances are you didn't select your plan, your company did. And so your company needs to realize what a bad plan they picked.
Yeah, it's really good advice, though, because I feel like that is where the trust between a patient and a practice is kind of fractured, which could result in, somebody not wanting to go back and see that dentist any longer. They feel like they were misled, or they feel that they were lied to, which is for many people even worse than, the additional cost. Though, of course, to your point, like it can be, a real big financial hardship for folks as well. And there is a lot of emotion tied to that. So do you think there's ever going to be a solution where this never happens again?
I think we are a couple of years away from having an automatic push and pull back with the insurance companies where we get immediate, estimates of care. I just don't think we're there yet. I think it's very hard. Their systems are so different. Part of what I do, I also work a lot with carriers. And what I see, I try to be the Switzerland, but what I see on the carrier side is that their systems are vastly different from each other. A lot of times they don't communicate with each other well, which is something that I think everybody just assumes the insurance companies all like have the same portal that they log on. They're very, very different. I don't think we're going to be there probably in the next 2 or 3 years. I think we're going to get close, and then I don't want to get political, but if we ever move towards healthcare for all, then all bets are off, because now we're not doing even dental coding. Now we're doing medical coding. And I'll be retired. So I'll just watch from the sidelines at that point. Like as soon as that happens, I'm retiring.
Is there a lack of desire on the carrier side to make things easier? And when, like I asked that, when you submit an inquiry for, eligibility and benefits, and it returns, we have practice management software, and it's a different result in a different format from every carrier. And it would seem to be a relatively simple thing to standardize the way that information is communicated, but it's not happening, or it doesn't seem to have. And I'm just wondering if it's because there's just no desire, or if it is significantly more complex than I'm giving it credit.
It's very complex. It's like a huge onion. So you've got the fact that a lot of these carrier systems were built on very archaic software systems. So even if they wanted to show you everything, their current system wouldn't handle it. Now you've got to be technical. You've got APIs on the back end that can then open up and people can log in. A lot of them have those, Principal and Guardian, United Concordia, they've all done really well with that, where the clearinghouses can pull information. That's why but the reason is the technology, really. So the infrastructure that the system's built on. Like you can go to their portal and pull out a lot of good information for one, but if you go to the fax back system for them, like United Concordia is one where for years their fax back was more complete than the insurance portal. Now they've revamped it. And so I think we're moving now where many of them have chatbots where you can actually get on and get the information via chatbots. We're moving there. And so to answer your question, are they making it more difficult? To be honest, I think and they have said it's costing them a ton of money to talk to us. So it actually is in their best interest to get their customer service more in line. The average office, like myself, one person in an office, would call an insurance company a couple times a day. Okay, so I'm not really the big impact that they're talking about. You have DSOs, multi-locations, who have teams of people that call for every patient. That's very expensive. Some of them contract with overseas people where they call all the time, and it's costing them a lot of money. So is it in their best interest financially to move us to an online system where they could download everything? Yeah. So I think actually that's the motivation to why we're going to get there. I don't think they want to hold things back from us. I just think we've got two different priorities. We want everything. They need to come up with one really good solution. And, technology costs a lot of money. And that's a whole different conversation. Yeah.
Along the same lines there is still a lot of manual intervention in claims processing, right? Like there's still a lot of human review and, auditing of the claims. I know that there are a number of the carriers that are starting to leverage AI technology on the imaging side, and they've got, these different thresholds that they're looking for. Do you see a world where you'll be able to remove the human element from that part of the process? I would love to think that the cost reduction would be so great that coverage could be increased, but it generally doesn't seem to work out that way in business. But kind of what is your viewpoint on that angle or that perspective?
So I think it's dangerous for those that want to AI everything. So legally, that's not going to happen, only because, and this is also true on the medical side, you cannot have a machine or algorithms, not even AI, but just algorithms in general, you cannot have them deny treatment. So the treatment has to be based on clinical guidelines, and then there's got to be a human that's pulling the trigger to say, no, this is not able to be done. And so on the medical side, there's really strong laws in place, and the dental side, it impacts us as well. So AI can be used to make sure that we're sending in the right date of birth. It can be used to make sure that the x-ray we send is actually of tooth number 2, not tooth number 8. So AI can be used to evaluate the clinical notes that are attached and scan them for keywords. But when it comes to an actual benefit denial when a consideration is requested by the office, that you don't want AI doing that. So I think we're protected in that AI is going to take us probably to the last mile of that, but we're not there yet. And I'm glad that we're not. Now, AI for us on the dental side, like in the provider's office, I think it's smart for us to use AI to get the best possible images. I just did a whole course for the Colorado Dental Association of AI and documentation. And I'm excited for AI that's going to listen to your clinical notes, listen to you speak to the dent. You're going to tell them everything that you did. It's going to walk you through it. It's going to come up with a nicely formatted note. Like that is going to make everybody's life easier. So I think there's a good room for AI. It's just I'm not ready for it to take over yet. I'm not.
So many applications, though, really. Like when you really start to think and get creative about it, not just on the imaging side, but to your point, like listening to the conversation, creating like well-structured notes, like there's just going to be, I think, a huge acceleration of new innovative tools that can really help practices and help efficiency. So that part's exciting. So I want to ask you about the Change Healthcare incident real quick. And I know you're tired of speaking about it at this point, because I'm sure it's been a topic of conversation since it occurred a few months back. So that cybersecurity ransomware incident, it was hugely disruptive for thousands of offices all across the country. I was impressed as a practice management vendor at the response that I saw across the industry, with many other providers really, doing what they could to kind of jump in as quickly as possible, make the changes needed to prevent the disruption from being any longer than needed. But I'm curious, from your perspective, have things been sorted out there? Are there still lasting implications and challenges that practices are facing as a result?
I think we've recovered really well, but there are some lasting issues out there. For the most part, most offices have changed away from Change Healthcare as their clearinghouse. And if you're still holding out, that's not what I advise at all. I mean, you need to pick one. But the lasting is the offices who had claims outstanding for review or had sent in attachments. So one thing that what a lot of people don't realize is any claim that was pending prior to that, and it was handled on the change system, including the attachments, that's not accessible at all anymore to all of the carriers. And so I talked to one girl, and when I explained this to her, she said, "Oh my God, that makes sense." She had thousands of dollars worth of claims that she was appealing, and she was in the middle of it. And she had to start the process all over again. But it's because the carrier just simply could not access any history. And so if you're waiting on claims that have been pending and Change was your clearinghouse, start from scratch. And every carrier that I've talked to during this period of time knows that there's going to be a grace period. Like they know that there's going to be claims that are going to hit there late, so right now I'm advising offices to go back. Any claim that was outstanding at the time, you should be checking on those, not just the ones that were supposed to go out during that time period, like February 19th, 20th is what they were saying. In fact, I just read something yesterday or this morning with Modern Healthcare saying that they identified the beginning of February is when things were starting, when the attacks, the probing was happening to see how vulnerable it was. And so any claim that was outstanding, which for some offices, that's a lot of claims, go back and check them and track them, and just plan on resubmitting all of your attachments again. Unfortunately, they're just not there.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. I have a couple more questions, then we can wrap up. I really do appreciate the time, and I've been learning a ton. We hear a lot from dentists and from our organizations that we work with that, on one hand, inflation is too high. On the other hand, reimbursements are too low. You kind of feel like you're getting squeezed on both sides. Do you see any relief coming in the future?
No. It's not a good answer. People don't like it. There's no incentive for the carriers to increase their reimbursement. The amount of offices getting out of network is not the number that everybody thinks it is. There's plenty more signing up, so it's probably even. Definitely there's some areas where they've seen a huge drop in participation. The carriers are nervous, but on a national level, not really. I don't see that we're going to have these huge increases in reimbursement. One thing I know for sure, and you all know this from dealing with car insurance, is that actuaries make the numbers on the back end. Those are those people that crunch the numbers. And if the actuaries are saying you can't pay $20 more a crown because this throws all the numbers off, you're not going to get $20 more a crown. You're just not. And if you negotiate your fees, you get an increase across a bunch of different codes. But to do an increase on a fee schedule for different zip codes, that would kill the carriers. It just wouldn't happen. Doctors don't like to hear this from me, though. You need to look at your expenses. And then they go, I've squeezed everything. Well, what about your credit card processing fees? What about considering passing the fee onto the patient? That you always gets heated, and I'm agnostic. You got to decide what's best for you. What about leaving a couple networks? Okay, I can't do that. Okay, well, and there's a lot of things. I mean, going to a group purchasing company rather than doing your regular vendor supplies. There's a lot of different things you can do, but it takes the effort, and it's fear. It's a lot of fear. Change is not easy. I mean, my God, no one likes to change anything. And when you are faced with losing a lot of money, not only is the economics there, but there's a lot of fear wrapped up into that and emotion. And that's so hard.
It's interesting with the credit card processing. I've gone kind of both ways on it, and we're seeing that it's becoming much more prevalent amongst groups and DSOs that are looking to apply the surcharge to cover, their portion of the fees. And my initial response was I was very adverse to it. I thought it was kind of a negative patient experience or a negative consumer experience. But I've thought more about it, and it's not at least within dental, you have another option. You could write a check, you could use a debit card, you could pay in a different way. So you're not necessarily leaving no recourse for the patient that doesn't want to have that 3% or whatever applied to the purchase. And it really does become like a convenience fee, which the practice is responsible for paying to the merchant services provider. So I've kind of changed my thought process on it, and I don't think it's as bad of what I initially thought a patient experience is as it could be. So I think it's a very viable thing to consider.
I think so. And I think a lot of the immediate knee-jerk reaction is wrap it up in the cost of business, but sometimes it's impossible to do that if you're in network. I'll share one quick anecdote. One of my friends is a very successful manager at a very successful endo practice, and she has squeezed everywhere she could. And she said, if we pass this on to the patients, we're going to be okay. And she was talking about like $80,000 a year. And she said, listen, I don't want to do this either. But she said, my employees need more CE. We spend a lot on technology. We do this, we do that. And she said, I have squeezed everywhere. This is where I can make it work and not have to reduce pay and still give competitive increases in salary. I mean, she's a smart cookie. She didn't come to that decision lightly. And I think a lot of people will do the same.
It does make a lot of sense. So last question, what are you most excited about right now? What lights you up?
I am excited about I hate to say it, it sounds so common, the AI applications in dentistry, but not necessarily the radiographs, because that's always super cool. But the fact that AI can help us be better documenters. If anybody has taken my class, then my thing is documentation. Documentation drives your revenue, is what I say all the time. I can't get claims paid if you don't give me good documentation. It's just an impossibility. And so if AI can help my doctors do better with their chart notes, that I get ridiculously excited about that. I also love just the fact that more and more managers are seeking more and more business training. The role of manager, which is very near and dear to me, it's not just the receptionist / assistant / whatever goes and grocery shops for the doctor. That's old school, right? We're actually like running businesses and looking at profit and loss. And that's really exciting, because a lot of these women, mostly women, they didn't go to college for this. Maybe some of them didn't even go to college, but they're super smart. And so taking the dental business centered classes and learning all of this and really turning some of their offices around, it's been very nice to see.
Thank you so much for joining. I know you've got a lot going on, and just before we kind of sign off, where can people find you? Website, socials, podcasts?
Odyssey MGMT is my website. Odyssey Management is my company. I'm constantly giving webinars. You can sign up for the online class, and I'm happy to give your audience members a code so they can have some savings, a $75 courtesy on it. I am usually speaking at a pretty large meeting somewhere near you, so love to see people on the road. But the podcast, you can find the links on my website. So one stop, odysseymgmt.com. And I'd love to meet people on the road. And I love to hear, like, what is going on in your office? Do you have any crazy stories? And I love that stuff. It's kind of the gossipy side of me.
That's great. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Teresa. It was really great to meet you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.